85 billion neurons, over 100 trillion synaptic and dendritic connections that create roughly 7 quadrillion events per second. We don't even know 1% of what we're capable of.
Who are you?
I make shit like that. I'll sit there and tinker and design stuff, and I'll come up with a different idea and go, oh, wow, what would happen if we do this? So when you look at the study of the human brain, it's a little over 100 years old. It's really nothing in the course of science. A single neuron has roughly 5,600 connections to it. It has more power than an i9 processor, but it takes less power for a neuron to run than an i9. I'll put my neurofield device on my head and I'll spin up a gamma frequency, and then I'll drop into a meditation. And in that meditation, I will think of a friend that I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll bring up the image of their face, and I'll bring up the feeling of love, and I'll just create this really powerful feeling until it's really big. And what happens is, most of the time they'll say, "That's weird, dude. I was just thinking about you." So when you put yourself into a state, you're going to generate an energy that is exponentially more powerful than anything you could do physically. Imagine 85 billion i9s synchronizing at the same time, just for a moment. That one moment is all you need.
Who are you?
I am Dr. Nicholas Dogris. I am a psychologist and I'm a neuroscientist based out of Santa Barbara, California.
Beautiful. And what kind of work do you do specifically?
I've been involved in the neuroscience field for over 30 years.
Wow.
I own a hardware and software manufacturing company called Neurofield. Neurofield, I also am, I participate in my sister company's Neurofield Neurotherapy, which is a clinic here in Santa Barbara, and our school, the School of Neurotherapy. I work alongside my wife, Dr. Tiffany Thompson, here in Santa Barbara. I'm also the executive director for a facility in Florida called FHE Health, and I'm the executive director of neurosciences there. That facility has over 165 beds inpatient and about 250 beds outpatient. Wow. I'm responsible for 10 neuro labs there. I read all the EEGs and order treatment for patients on a daily basis. Been doing that for about 8 years there.
Wow.
I'm also the executive director of another program in Arizona called Illuminea Neuro. It's out of Scottsdale, and that's another place where we're growing the service of neuroscience and neurostimulation, neuromodulation.
Great. And how did you get into all this work? You said you've been doing it for 30 years. You're still in the same field. So I guess what brought you into it, and why do you still love it today?
You know, that's interesting. I was back in when the Earth was cooling. You know, I was in my undergraduate program, getting a degree in psychology, in applied psychology at California State University, Long Beach, California. And I was interested in becoming a NASA psychologist. I wanted to go to space. And I was all of 23 when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And then I jumped straight into Humboldt State University in Northern California, where I would get a master's degree in research psychology. And I studied under a NASA psychologist there who was going to help me become, an astronaut, basically. And so I was really, really jazzed about doing that. I did all the work. I got really deep into research psychology, which is incredibly interesting to me. And that's when I stumbled upon Dr. John Morgan, who ran the neuroscience portion of the research lab at Humboldt State at the time. And he introduced me to the EEG, electroencephalogram. Now, up to that point in time in my life, I'd been playing music professionally for years. I play a number of different instruments, and I've recorded professionally and whatnot. And up to that portion of my life, I had actually come across digital recording. And so I took an advanced psychophysiological class, and Dr. Morgan was treating it. He was teaching it, and there was on the board you saw this squiggle go across, and he goes, "Can anybody tell me what that is?" And I raised my hand. He goes, "All right," and I said, "It's a bass note." Right? And he goes, "How'd you know that?" I go, "Well, that's what you see on a really low end bass guitar." I go, "But it looks like it's a lot slower than that." And I just had the ability to naturally look at those squiggles and know what the frequencies were, from playing music. And it became apparent to me almost instantaneously, the brain's a musical instrument. It does something that is incredibly complex, and the noise coming out of this thing is unlike anything you've ever seen. And that just, I don't know, for some reason or another, it really got me. And then at that point, I was like, "Yeah, I want to do this in space." So neuroscience in space, And I've always been like a sci-fi freak, so I like Star Wars. That really inspired me a lot in my life. The unseen, the ability to focus your mind, use the Force. Star Trek. Dr. McCoy, love that guy. I mean, how can you not? And so. Those things were really inspirational to me. And I was actually I applied to NASA, and I was going to get in. And then I learned very quickly that they had no interest in sending me to space. They wanted me to generate weapons because I was really good with computers. And I'm still good with computers. Nowhere near what I was, but the ability to put together an idea and then express it in a machine was really interesting to me. And I got into the computational neuroscience at that point. And I wrote a study and published it in 1991. And it was a study where we put this little photon generator up to your eye, and we turned it up bright enough so when it went off, you would say you saw the little blip of light, right? And then that was condition number one. And then we had condition number two, where it's still on, but we lowered the intensity to the point where you would say you didn't see it when it went off. So we had condition one, it was visible and it's on. Condition two, it's not visible, but it's still on. Right? And then there was condition three, where it wasn't on at all. And so we alternated between those three conditions, and every time we did it, we would capture that little piece of your brain activity and monitor to see what happened.
Yeah.
When you see a stimulus like that, around 350 to 500 milliseconds after you see it, your brain and your frontal lobe creates what's called a P300 response, a positive wave that happens about 300 to 500 milliseconds post-stimulus.
Got it.
And it represents a cognition, where you say, when it gets big, you will say, well, that's when your brain says, I see it, right? But when you don't see it, there's no response. There's hardly any response. So in the go condition, you'll see it. In the no-go condition, it's flat, right? So what we found was that in the two first conditions where the light was on, regardless if you said you saw it or you didn't see it, you got the same size P300 response. Okay. And when you looked at the third condition, you didn't get anything. It was flat. So that would end up being used as one of the seminal studies that would make it into the FBI.
Wow.
And and they used it. And what they did was they get these guys that are in prison saying, I didn't do the crime. And so they took a picture of your cot that you sleep on, and then they would show you that picture on the screen. And that would be condition number one, right? Where, you see the light and it's on. Right? Right? Condition number two was picture of the crime scene. Okay. And so, were you there or not? But on this one, they show you that. And if you were there, right, then you would generate the same P300 as the cot that you saw.
Wow.
Right. And then condition number three, we had to show you a picture that we knew you didn't see. We had to create an off condition, so we get a picture of the warden's office. Right. You're like, yeah, have you ever seen this place? And then that was the one that keeps on going off. And of course, that's the flat one,
Yeah.
right? So if you hadn't seen that crime scene, you would be like the warden's office. But if you were actually there, you'd be like you're caught,
Whoa.
right? And
Yeah.
so it became like a neurological lie detector.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's wild.
it's pretty cool, right?
Yeah.
And and then see, this is the interesting stuff. It's like, whoa, so I've always been like the kind of person I make shit like that.
Yeah.
I'll sit there and tinker and design stuff, and I'll come up with a different idea and go, oh wow, what would happen if we do this, or
Yeah.
And so then I got into that's how it kind of rolled me into neuroscience. And but then of course I wasn't going to take the military option, so I went back to LA, and I would work at a freestanding psychiatric hospital for like 7 years, and I worked on almost every unit of that hospital, and would work throughout my education. I was getting my PhD at the time in health psychology, with an emphasis on medicine. And so we were being trained as psychologists that would have, pharmaceutical privileges.
Yeah.
And not that I was really interested in slinging drugs. I just wanted to know more about the brain and the body.
Sure.
Right? And so simultaneously, while I did that, I would end up working for different people, using the EEG and neurofeedback. And I worked for Margaret Ayers, who would go down in history as the mother of neurofeedback. She generated the first patented EEG device in the United States in 1990. And I would end up getting trained by her and using her system. I actually still have the original case sitting in here with me. And so that kind of launched me into the neuroscience field. Yeah, and I would end up going for years playing with almost every kind of technology out there. And I watched people have responses where, symptoms of depression would go down, symptoms of anxiety would go down, people with head injuries would start to function better. So that was kind of the introduction.
Yeah. Was there like a moment in that journey that like really stood out to you that kind of went like from, oh, this is like really cool, fun, theoretical stuff to like, wow, this can actually make a like significant impact in somebody's life?
Yeah. Yeah, there was so I watched people do this, and I was always intrigued with neurotherapy. I thought it was good. However, it took a long time to get treatment effects that were really going to stick. And we were kind of seen by the medical field as a redheaded stepchild, and so it was always kind of like, and it was because the methods and the standards that were used were different depending on the amplifier you bought and who you bought it from. The field is, I came from, I was one of the pioneers in the field. I'm one of the earliest people in the field. And, at that time, people were making these devices. It was little mom and pop operations,
Right.
So, I kind of jumped between them and would end up buying that guy's amp and that guy's amp, and then playing with all the technology and reverse engineering it, and,
Yeah.
all that stuff, breaking into systems and rewriting the code. I did that for one system, and then I gave it to the guy. I said, "Here, by the way, now it works better, but try this." He was like, "Wow." He goes, "How about if I give you the software development kit instead of you breaking into my system?" And I go, "You can if you want," So, which was kind of fun. But so in 2002, my eldest son was born, and there was complications with his birth that caused hypoxic injury to his brain. And I knew at the time, from treating children for 12 years, that in order to train a child in neurofeedback, they have to be old enough to be able to sit there, follow the instructions, and engage in the treatment. And, with little babies, it's just, and I know that if you take an early life injury and then you wait 5 years, you're pretty much behind the 8 ball by the time you get into treatment.
Yeah.
You're missing milestones, your development's delayed, all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, I didn't want to wait. And so I decided I was going to try to find a way to help my kid. I was hell bent on it. And I just started flipping over everything I could find. I'm scouring the internet. And much to my disdain, I came across the worst snake oil you ever seen in your life. Dozens of companies making claims and promoting products that were just, I mean, fake, not real. You know, they're like predators on the scared parent. And I was definitely a scared parent. By the time I went into full action with it, it was about 18 months after the birth, and he wasn't walking. He was barely talking, maybe one or two words. And I knew from my training that he was delayed. And so I was like, I got to do something.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to get into another form of neurofeedback that I think could help him. And I learned it. And that was the product that I ended up reverse engineering because it did some of what I wanted, but it wasn't enough. So I broke into it and changed it, but it still wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And so that's when I was like, I need help, and I wanted to make a stimulation device. See, with neurofeedback, it's operant conditioning, right?
Right.
We set the computer, and we tell the computer, monitor this brainwave, and when it goes up in power, give a reward. When it goes down in power, don't do anything or take away the reward.
Right.
And back in the day, it was a bell. So when you were doing it, you heard ding ding ding. That stupid bell. I was like, I couldn't stand it. But then but technology kept on rolling, and then they had the screen dimmers, so you could watch a movie and put the screen dimmer over the movie. And when your brain was doing it, the movie was big and bright. But when it wasn't, it gets dark.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, cool. I can do this and see how that rolls with him. And there was some improvement, but with neurofeedback, it takes a long time for the brain to start creating what you want it to create, right? And that's why neurofeedback is slow. You might get the reward a couple hundred times in a 30-minute period,
Right.
but I wanted something that was faster, and so I came across what's called TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation, developed by Anthony Barker in the UK. And when I looked at it, I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then I realized that the intensity of TMS was crazy high. And it was a replacement therapy for electroconvulsive therapy, or what is known as shock therapy, right? And so, with TMS, they have this big butterfly magnet. They put it up to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and then they fire it off, and it's so strong it triggers a nerve and makes your right hand twitch. Okay, and so that's how they know it's getting in there. And then they bomb the brain for 25 seconds or so, and then they stop it. And so that then these pulses are it's the cleared form of treatment that the FDA says is for the treatment of depression. It's really barbaric. It's very strong, but it has work. It does have utility for people with treatment-resistant depression. So I was interested in it, but I'm like, there's no way I'm going to put this on a baby. You'd be insane. It's like So then I asked myself the question. It's electromagnetic, and so an electromagnetic field will traverse almost everything. If I put a tiny little magnet to your head on one side, I can detect it from the other side of your head with a meter. It'll go right through you seamlessly. And I thought, I wonder if anybody's done it on the low-level side. Instead of TMS, the hammer, what about a whisper? And so then it kind of hit me. I was like, oh, man, this is a great idea. And then I'm like, I need a frequency generator, right? And but I didn't know how to build one of those things, and it was like, and I actually started to look on the net for ways to build your own thing, and I found stuff, and I was going to buy the parts and make it, and but then something really magical happened, which is, it just continues to blow my mind to this day. Across the street from me, a pro guitar player had moved in, right, and I'm a professional musician, and so I went and talked to the guy. He's super cool. And I said, hey, man, can I get a lesson? And he's like, sure. And so it was like, I don't know, 2 days before my lesson, and I'm hanging out and I'm watching the movie The Secret, and I don't know if you ever saw it. It's about the law of intention, right? And basically, the law of intention is you create the thought in your mind with a feeling in your heart, and you can manifest whatever you want in the world, right? And I was like, right on. I love that idea.
Yeah.
And there was one of the guys in the movie, Reverend Beckwith. For one reason, that cat got me, man. I said it. You got to say it with. You got to bring up the idea with the feeling of love, and if you do it correctly, you can move the world. So I raised my wine glass and I said, I meet a radio frequency engineer, and him and I make this device, and we change the world.
Wow.
And I go, click, ha, 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 glug, glug, and I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be funny. 2 days later, man, I go across the street to this guy's place, and I have my guitar lesson. It's over, and put my guitar away. The next student walks in. He goes, hey, this is my next student. He goes, Brad, meet Nick. Nick, meet Brad. Brad goes, hey. He goes, what do you do? I go, psychologist, neuroscience. I go, what do you do? He goes, I'm a radio frequency engineer. Fucking time stops. Okay? I could hear the crackle in the air, man. I knew that something real was happening. And I'm thinking in my head, I gotta tell him about the frequency generator. And then I'm like, this is crazy. What are you thinking?
Yeah.
And I could feel like time was coming back. I go, I need a 4-channel frequency generator. He goes, okay, that's easy. He goes, for what? And I said, well, I think we can help kids with autism. And he goes, I have an autistic son.
Wow.
30 days later, he built the damn thing by himself. And I'm holding it in my hands, and I had programmed it, and I said, okay, let's try a thing I call a brain brightener. We're both sitting there, and we had this cap at the time where it was going to deliver this electromagnetic stimulation. So I put it on my head, and Brad is like the most salt of the earth, kind person you've ever met in your life. He's a gentleman in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
And a damn good friend. And he looks at me, and he's got all this concern in his face, and he goes, what happens if something goes wrong? I go, well, call 911. And he says, and what am I supposed to tell him? And I'm like, stop worrying. And I lean forward, and I hit the button, and I start it, And it delivers this stimulation to me for about 30 seconds, and then it shuts off. And I take the thing off, and, you can't feel it. You don't even know what's happening. But all of a sudden, the lights in the room got brighter.
Wow.
And I went, oh, wow, that's a trip, And then I was like, oh, I got another idea. And so we jump into it, and we keep on going. We call this the Tuesday night programming sessions, And we would go until, I would go to his house 7 o'clock. We would go to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning just building this thing.
Yeah.
And we were both we knew it. We just knew we had something really powerful on our hands. And it would just, in such a cool way, we were just driven.
Yeah.
I can't tell you about that. I don't know what that is or where it comes from, The higher power, there's something there that's really powerful.
Yeah.
But, I got my hands on the first iteration, and I started using it on my kid. And I kept everybody blind to what was happening. And he just started coming back.
Wow.
Almost immediately. He started responding. Everybody was telling me, he's really doing great. He's following directions. He's speaking more, and he's making eye contact. He's right there, and he rehabbed, man.
Yeah.
And in all of its simplicity, all that thing did, it didn't force his brain to do anything. It simply stimulated the cells enough so they called for resources.
Right.
And when the cells call for resources, you get capillary dilation and increased blood flow. And when you get increased blood flow and resources into the brain, it engages in neurogenesis, and it begins to repair itself because it's the best doctor in the room. Wow. And my kid got better. And that was it, man. At that point, I was like, shit, I got it,
Yeah.
and I was stoked. I was like, and then I was, I was, I was getting my board certification in QEEG, and my mentor was Corey Hammond. Corey was a premier psychologist who studied hypnosis under Milton Erickson, and he was at the Utah University of School of Medicine. And Corey was he really straight laced dude, and he's like, I heard you were making something. We're online and we're having my weekly supervision with him. And I said, yeah, I didn't want to say anything. I'm doing this completely under the radar. And I was like, I knew I could get in trouble for it, but I was like, screw it, man. You can pound sand. I'm going to help my kid. And so, but I wasn't going to be, I didn't put it out there for anybody to know. But people had been talking, and he said, I heard you made something, and I'm wondering what it is. And I told him about it, and he's like, send me one. Now, we had made 5. Okay. So I sent him one, and a week later he calls me up, and he's really serious. And I'm thinking, and he said, and this guy, he mentored me in a real sense of a word. I mean, he helped me through, to understand myself better, to understand the world better, understand hypnosis better, understand EEG better. Very professional, astute, person. And so he had a lot of impact on me. And he said, Nick, you have the ethical responsibility to release this to the world. And I was like, fuck, I go, yeah, talk about throwing something on your shoulders. I go, dude, I don't want to do that. I go, I just want to help a kid. And he goes, are you kidding? He goes, you're not going to release this? He goes, this is fantastic. He goes, I know you have other ideas, don't you? And I'm like, I do. And he's like, you got it. You got to keep on moving forward. And I was like, okay. And that's when Neurofield was born. Wow. And so Brad and I popped the doors open and began to innovate. And we created, the first one was called the X1000. And then we ended up making 4 different revisions of that guy and called it 2000, 3000, 4, and got those going. And then we made a cranial electric stimulator. And then we made a light photonic stimulator. Yeah, all sorts of stuff,
Yeah.
And, Brad is a, cradle to grave engineer. Between the two of us, we were able to put together everything we needed. And it was just 2 of us, making it. And so there was, I funded the whole thing, so I didn't have to deal with anybody.
Yeah.
And it was like, cool, let's just do this, And people were getting better. And then people started to join this little community, and they got real excited about it because, case after case after case of what was known to be like, untreatable problems started to respond. And we never saw, thank God, a significant adverse effect, meaning that nobody was irreversibly harmed. So we felt like this is the right thing to do. Yeah. So for several years we just kept on building stuff. And now we have 18 years later, we have a whole baked idea, that is still growing.
Yeah. Yeah. So you obviously make such a huge impact with your son at that moment, and I'm sure helped probably I forget your friend's name, but the other engineer, and I'm sure his kid as well, having that light bulb moment go off, and then taking on, like you said, almost that ethical responsibility and that weight for you. What was that like to go kind of from that shift of, cool, we're helping this one person I care about, to shoot, I have a, like you said, an ethical responsibility to really bring this out into the world and sort of go through the trials and tribulations of, bringing something that is sort of outside of the mainstream of science into sort of the real world.
Yeah. That's a really, it's a powerful statement. It was hard, That building stuff, no, that's easy. You know, I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's where we have our fun. Managing all the pieces that go along with that, training people, dealing with the regulatory oversight of, you know, the government was probably the most challenging things I've had to deal with in my life. And, you know, with some pretty serious consequences if things go wrong.
Right.
And so, you know, there was many times where I wanted to, you know, jump ship. And I'm like, screw this, you know, I don't want to do this anymore. But, you know, when you see somebody's kid get better, you know, and you look in their eyes and you go, okay, yeah, that's why I did this.
Yeah.
You know, so it gets real fast.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, okay, you know, this is, but it's been, you know, that's been a thing for sure. It's been challenging. And I think that the hardest part is, you know, is staying on course, you know, because you get bumped around a lot with this kind of stuff. You know, people have no idea what it takes to come up with an idea and then make it realized, and the commitment it takes to, you know, walking through, you know, making something real in the world that actually has an impact, you know, for the greater good.
Yeah. When you found yourself being like knocked off course or pulled off course by a different direction, I'm sure you have tons of people throwing you very well intentioned advice or advice that's worked for them, or, you know, you're getting pushed to make it something that you don't really want it to be or believe in on a deep level. Like, how did you navigate kind of realigning with that like deeper core intention and value as you're navigating all of those circumstances?
Yeah. You know, I mean, I was lucky to have met Robert Firestone, Dr. Robert Firestone. In my late 20s, I was reading his book called The Fantasy Bond. And I was in college, you know, and The Fantasy Bond was, you know, Firestone was an analyst, and Freudian analyst. And he came up with his own therapy called voice therapy. And he taught you about the critical inner voice and destructive thought processes. And he did it from a kind of a, not necessarily Freudian, but it was a cognitive behavioral blended with affective emotional pieces that are dynamic, right? And a really complex little theory. And I went and met him, and the guy was so cool, man. I mean, they had this lifestyle of, you know, they all were really innovative people, and they sailed boats around the world. And it was there doing my own personal work about, you know, my own destructive processes, the way I think, the way I talk to myself, the way I regard myself, where I learned about, I became very sensitive to this process. And that's a game changer, man. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know if I would be sitting here doing this or doing that, or, you know, Neurofield would even be on the map if it wasn't for that. Because when things go south, you got to be, you know, in touch with your heart, and you got to think about the way that you're moving through something, and how you're talking to yourself, and how that voice is talking about somebody else, how it's limiting the way you think. You know, a lot of people tell themselves no in a lot of ways. And then when they say no, they stop working the problem. One thing that Bob taught me a long time ago, he says, how else can I do this? He goes, when you come up against it, just say, how else can I do this? He goes, you don't have to have an answer. He goes, but just float that in the back of your head for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, try doing that. And he goes, the other thing is, you don't have a right to harass yourself. And I go, like, what the fuck are you saying, man? I'm like, what's this hippy dippy stuff, man? I go, what do you mean I right to harass myself? He's like, yeah. He goes, you give yourself, you know, carte blanche to go after you.
Yeah.
He goes, would you let some guy walk up to you and just start berating you, cussing you out, telling you what a piece of shit you are, He goes, how long would that last?
Hmm.
I go, not too long, man. And he goes, but you do it to yourself all the time. And it was really telling, you know. He wrote a number of different books. And Living a Life of Meaning and Compassion, really beautiful book, where he talked about, you know, learning how to be compassionate towards yourself. It sounds so simple, but it's really so complex because, you know, you learn all these things, you know, from people around you, you
Right.
know, your parents and kids around you, beliefs that you have that you're good, you're bad, you're ugly, you're fat, you're skinny, you know, you're tall, you're thin. It doesn't matter, you know, and then that becomes your point of view that you believe
Right.
and you swallow wholeheartedly. And then when you go to do something that's this hard, you know, and something, you know, does come and it will come
Yeah.
and it will come many times, it's like, what do you do with that?
Hmm.
And that's the rub. And I think if it wasn't for that, I don't know if I'd be sitting here.
Yeah. I mean, I resonate with that a lot. I mean, I had a moment this past in like mid 2025 where I kind of hit like a threshold for myself where I was pushing myself really hard. And I would have these nights where I was just in such a rage, shame kind of spiral. And I kind of hit a point where I was like, if I'm making like one commitment to my life, it's like I'm never willing to go to that place again, right? Like I'm not willing to beat myself up if that's the cost of success or whatever that thing is that I had to be. And for me, I hit like I want to say like a healthy wall is what I'll call it, where like I almost like couldn't do anything productive for about 4 or 5 months because it was like I had to like that was such a core part of like my motivation system that
Hmm.
me being able to like go to bed even if I've stayed up way too late and done nothing productive that day and whatever, like to go to bed still with like a peace of mind was like one of the most challenging practices. And I feel like it's also been some of the most powerful healing on a deep core level that I've done through that period by essentially training my brain and my nervous system to no longer have that like conditioned like response. I'm curious for you, and I had this question like with these kinds of like deep transformation, like integration pieces that we go through, like as a neuroscientist, what's your understanding of like what's going on with our like brain and biology as we go through these kind of like deeper transformations of like undoing like this, I would say deep critical mind, if you will.
Yeah. You know, I could say I don't know, uh,
Sure.
you know, which would be a valid answer, you know, because really I don't think anybody really knows. I can theorize and tell you what I think is happening.
Yeah.
You know, the brain is it's a modular organ, so you have these big clumps of networks, and these networks talk to each other, and you have networks where you have the default mode network, which is your kind of chill and relax network when you're just idling and sitting there. And
Hmm.
then you have your salience network and your central executive network that come in and they turn on when you're active and you're doing something. And that little triple network model keeps on balancing on and off, you know. Now, each one of these networks can work independent of the other. They're like little cities that are self contained. And they have functions that they do. And they don't necessarily have to talk to the other parts of the brain. They do all the time, but they don't have to.
Hmm.
And when you're not functioning well, when you have a lot of stuff on your mind, stress, when you have a lot of chemicals in your body, when you do things to yourself, you know, you eat bad, you go to McDonald's every day. I mean, there's all these different things that are going to impact that system. Those systems will hunker down. And now you're only going to be functioning at maybe 50 to 60% of your capabilities, you know? And when a person is really getting into a higher frequency consciousness, those systems are turned up and they are in phase with each other. and they are able to communicate at breakneck speeds. And when that happens, that synergy of those 85 billion neurons takes on another kind of energy. And that is what is really fascinating when you look at like the continuum, the physics behind that, and how that model has the ability to scale in an almost infinite way. So, we don't even know 1% of what we're capable of. A single neuron has roughly 5,600 connections to it. It has more power than an i9 processor. But it takes less power for a neuron to run than an i9. And if you tried to emulate that neuron using modern computers, it would take a city block of computers to do that with an astronomical power consumption. So when we say like what happens, it's the communication pathways in the brain working in a seamless way, flowing. It's your heart, filled with joy and happiness, and that guy, which is the biggest electromagnetic force in your body, talking to the brain, which it has neurons in it as well. And so that synergy between the heart and the head starts to spin. Now you can measure a human heart from 10 feet away.
Wow.
Oh yeah. And so the power of that guy, when synergistically connected to the brain, is now going to have a lot of impact. So when you put yourself into a state, like a meditative state, where you're able to really focus your energy in a way that reflects feelings that are kindness and compassion, you're going to generate an energy that is exponentially more powerful than anything you could do physically.
And it's like, hold on, I think I'm getting some feedback. I'm just going to put in like my headphones real quick, see if that fixes it. Producing too much energy. Just see, make sure this is going correctly. AirPods, and this is still coming from there. Yeah, great. Yeah, it sounds like it went away.
All right, good.
Cool. Yeah, my follow-up to that was just going to be like, you talk about like when we're, blending that energy with kindness and compassions, bring this like really powerful energy into the world. And I guess my question back to you is like, is kindness and compassion, are those things that we can measure on like a EKG or an EEG or that kind of a level at all?
I think so.
Yeah.
But it's hard to put a specific biomarker to it. I think that there's other things that also create a very similar type of look in the brain, so to speak. And so I don't know if we have all of the ability to do that at this point in time. We have a sense of it. We can look at these power levels and see how they fluctuate when you have certain kinds of feelings.
Yeah.
I've watched people in deep meditative states generate enormous amounts of power internally in their heart. And we're measuring the heart, and we're watching these different frequency bands of the heart. One of them is called the VLF band, and the VLF band is intrinsic to the heart, and it will increase in power because with every heartbeat the cells of the heart rub together. And as you meditate and you focus that feeling more, the VLF starts to go up through the roof. You can watch it. And we did EEG measurements for Dr. Joe Dispenza, and in one of his, in his big, meditative conferences that he does. And I watched 7 people do it all at the same time.
Wow.
We had them all hooked up, watching them, and it was phenomenal. So that's a very real phenomenon, and I think it's something that we should look into more and learn how to, create and teach our children how to understand and get them into it, so that they can be born into a world where they're learning that from a very young age, learning about how to be compassionate, learning about the critical inner voice, learning how to, combat those kinds of things. And, in learning, it's a level of strength that builds integrity and it builds character in a way that I think would be very helpful.
From your like perspective, if somebody were wanting to develop that ability to harness like compassion and love and that kind of those feelings within themselves to combat these inner voice, like where would you have somebody start?
Oh. Well, let's see. We should send them to some big festival and let them jump into plant medicine.
I mean, I'm not against that. I'm a huge festival junkie, so.
I think honestly, there's a lot of different ways. I mean, meditation, psychotherapy, where those are kind of traditional methods. I think a teacher appears when he or she is meant to appear. And so part of it, if you want to start, create the intention. And it's doing that every day. It's not about what you say; it's about what you do. What are you going to do every day? How are you going to move the needle? And no matter how small it is, and so it begins with a simple investigation and trusting in the process. When you create the energy, it's going to push you in that direction, But like Wayne Gretzky says, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
So it's like, take some shots, And so, meditation is good. I love the use of plant medicine. Done in the right hands and the right kind of supervision. I think it has immense qualities and utility beyond that of almost any pharmaceutical medicine available. Psychiatric pharmaceutical medicines, for instance.
Yeah.
It has a great ability to show you your heart. So those things I think are very, very useful. Again, done appropriately with the right kind of people at the helm.
Right.
Not to
Big
sit
caveat.
there and trip balls, but to actually do something that's, gonna, put you in touch with you.
Yeah.
Seeking out mentors, reading, finding things like that, those are powerful things too. But I think it's the path of wanting it and doing it.
Yeah.
A lot of people are kind of entitled to thinking like, oh, this is going to come to me or it should be done for me, and it doesn't work that way, and because all that does is it creates resentment and anger. And so you just sit there and you're angry because it didn't come. It's like, okay, you're stomping on the brake while trying to push the gas. I mean, it's just that kind of power brake, it doesn't work, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes me think about earlier when you're talking about kind of first, creating the device with your son, and you had that moment where you watched The Secret and you connected, I think, even that intention with, your heart energy, essentially, with those feelings of compassion, etc. I know I kind of asked you a similar question not too long ago, but like, I'm almost curious from, again, I realize that you don't necessarily know, but like from your best understanding or your perspective or your theory, like, because I've seen for myself and for so many different people, like the idea of like manifesting or those kinds of things that happen when you do seem to set a clear intention and these amazing synchronicities line up for us. Like from your mind or your perspective, like what do you think is actually happening that ends up leading to that occurring?
Wow. Maybe instead of saying I don't know, I'll say I'm not going to tell you. No. Yeah,
you actually do know. You're just giving a secret.
That's a great question, and I think it's really the one that is going to be addressed for a very long time to come. We are in our infancy with this understanding of the brain. When you look at the study of the human brain, it's a little over 100 years old, maybe 120 years old. It's really nothing in the course of science.
Yeah.
We're making some great discoveries, but I'm sure, if I was to tell you how many things we discovered over the last 30 years, most people have no idea. I mean, how much has really kind of boiled up, in all this time. There's a lot. because there's always so much to see here, which is fascinating, but it's true. And how did we get here? God, man, I wish I could give you an answer to it. I think, because I could just sit here all day long and tell you how I think it works.
Well, I mean, I would love that. I mean, I would love your best hypothesis. We'll call it your best hypothesis.
On how, ask me the question again. Let me hear it one more time, a different way.
Maybe a different way would be like, how would you, maybe from a neurological perspective or from your own perspective, like what's your best hypothesis on, for lack of a better word, like manifestation, or for those moments like the one that you experienced that led to the creation of that device for helping your son?
It's the same answer I gave you before, but I'll say it differently. It's phase. Okay? So if you measure your hippocampus, under your left temporal lobe or right temporal lobe, and then you measure your frontal pole and your frontal lobe, and you want to see if these two guys are communicating with each other. In order for the frontal lobe to access the memory center, right, it has to send a message, right? But if the bridge is down, you don't get a message over there. What happens is that when that happens, people start to get they can't pull up memories. They can't remember something that happened. Or they have problems with certain words or word finding, right? And eventually, in advanced stage, it becomes like Alzheimer's or dementia, right? And when you measure somebody with dementia, and you measure 8 hertz here and 8 hertz here, and you look at the phase of those two waveforms, if they were healthy and you superimpose those waveforms, they should look like one waveform. They would be exactly in phase with each other. There would be 0 phase difference, right? But the more out of phase it goes, the more they start to look like 2 different waveforms. Now they become out of phase with each other. The more out of phase it goes, the more the bridge goes down. And when it's completely anti-phase, you can't get anything across the bridge. Okay? But when it's in phase, then what happens is something magical. Gamma, which is a really fast waveform, an emergent property in the brain, emerges. It pops up out of nowhere. And it's carrying information from that hippocampus that runs across the bridge to the frontal lobe and delivers it. And then it goes away. It all happens in milliseconds. So these dynamics from gamma emerge when you're in a state where you're in flow. And when these parts of your brain are now communicating in a seamless, fluid way, where they're in phase with each other, and more structures start to do the same thing, now you have a exponential increase in your processing power. Imagine 85 billion I9 synchronizing at the same time. Right? Just for a moment. That one moment is all you need. There's all sorts of theoretical conjecture as to what could happen. Did you ever see the movie Lucy?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, so there's a movie called Lucy, and it's a science fiction flick. It's cool. It's about this drug that ends up producing more access to regions of your brain, to where what would happen if you access 30% of your overall capabilities, 40%, 50%, and Lucy ends up becoming like this god, essentially. It's wild. It's wild. Morgan Freeman's in it. It's a really good movie. And it's really intriguing because it's like, that we have capabilities like that, and it's fun. I conduct a mind experiment where I play around with this idea, and I've messed with some of my friends in doing this. And so what I do is I'll actually put my neurofield device on my head, and I'll spin up a gamma frequency, and I'll give it to my frontal lobe, and then I'll drop into a meditation. And in that meditation, I will think of a friend that I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll bring up the image of their face, and I'll bring up the feeling of love, and I'll just create this really powerful feeling until it's really big, and then I'll stop what I'm doing, and I'll call them. And I'll say, hey, what's going on? And what happens is most of the time they'll say, "That's weird, dude. I was just thinking about you." I'm serious. And I'm like, right on, you know. So I did it to one of my buddies, right? And and he's like, dude, that's so trippy. And I told him like what I was up to. And he's like, okay. And so it was like 2 days later, and I did it again to him. And I called him. He goes, get the fuck out of my head, man. That was so weird. You know, and I was just like, I was like, oh man. I go, it worked again. He goes, dude, that was really uncanny. He goes, it makes me feel like you could just crawl in there anytime you want to. And I was like, yeah, you know. And there's, you know, there's all sorts of theories about remote viewing and stuff like that. And you know, I think that it is a innate skill that we all have. You know, there's nothing about me that's any different neurologically than anybody else. But I'm using a device that seems to have like in a way to accelerate that process. You know,
Right.
but I think it's totally possible. So you know, when you think about like how do we get there? It's practicing. It's creating practices that, you know, I'm just playing around, having fun. But when I do, you know, meditations where I'll sit back and just create a feeling and stay right there and throw that out there, you know, and let that be, you know. And just like with anything, the butterfly effect is real. And so, you know, if everybody took a little bit of the butterfly effect, you know, and practice that, then we might move some energy. You know,
Beautiful.
and that's part of it, but that's, you know, what I would think about when you say that.
Yeah. You were talking about you know, having the brain move in this like beautiful, you know, synchrony essentially. And one of the things I was noticing as I was doing a little research on you is like one of the things you have kind of pioneered or were I think first to create was it sounded like you were creating like basically like noise stimulation, or like a pink noise even stimulation. And so I'm curious about this because it almost seems like the opposite of what you would be wanting to create is like not more noise in the brain, but like less noise and more of that clarity. So like, can you talk to me just a little bit about like, I guess the pink noise and the noise stimulation, like what is the, I guess, intended purpose of that and the effect of those?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's good noise and there's bad noise. There's disruptive noise, and then there's noise that is actually organized chaos. So when you're awake, those 85 billion neurons create what's called pink noise. Okay? And it's randomness. Because the brain is the most complex form of noise in the world, in the galaxy, in the universe as we know it. There's nothing more complex. When you have that many neurons all firing and doing things in a whole bunch of different frequency bands, ranging from really slow, like 0.1 cycles per second, all the way up to 1,000 cycles per second.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibilities on what it could be doing at any given time multidimensionally.
Right. And I know you told me when we were off camera, like the total number of them. Can you just like, could you mind just doing that like for the audience about like the various brains and how many various connections, and
Yeah,
because I know that you've mathematically worked it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was it was at UC San Diego, the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience. Brilliant minds down there. They worked it out with the supercomputer, and they estimated that there's 85 billion neurons. That creates over 100 trillion synaptic and dendritic connections that create roughly 7 quadrillion events per second.
So how big is like 7 quadrillion?
Quadrillion. So
So
you
like
go billions, quadrillion.
Wow.
Like from billions, trillions, quadrillion.
quadrillions, got it. Yeah. Wow.
It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, that is huge. Every second that's happening. So, yeah, you know, that's just, you know, that's enough to just like drop the mic and walk away. You know, I mean, but when those neurons are firing in an awake state within those frequency bands, then the background noise of the brain, or what's called as aperiodic noise, is pink. All right.
What do you mean by pink?
It's the band. It's the band
Okay.
in which it creates all these frequencies. And then when
Like,
you go
does
to
it come as like the frequency comes to the color pink, or like I guess why is it
not the color thing. Well, there's, you know, so when in engineering they'll talk about different kinds of filters. Okay, and so there's certain ranges that will define the pink noise range versus brown noise. For instance, when you go to sleep, your brain becomes a brown noise generator, and it's slower. It's slower randomness. Okay, and what we did was we knew that the brain operates on this pink noise randomness when you're awake, and one of the things that it needs that to be there in order to function correctly. Otherwise, we would have all sorts of different issues if we didn't have that happening. And so, what we did was we filtered this white noise in our world, and we created envelopes, the ability to create envelopes of pink noise. And so, we can say, I want an envelope from 10 to 50 cycles per second, and I want to randomize that curve.
When you say an envelope, is that like just like
It's a range.
it's a range that you're
A range.
particularly
It's
using?
frequency. Yeah, it's a frequency range, and you can define it. And so it took two of my best engineers 6 months to calculate all the coefficients and everything mathematically to figure out how to actually do that curve.
Wow.
And we did it. And then we made it where it was programmable. So it's one thing to do it for a single fixed range. It's another thing to do it for what the user would go, well, I want to do 100 to 500 or 100 to 375 or whatever. It pops it in and it creates the curve, and then it randomizes all through the curve. And so what that does is it helps to repair the aperiodic noise in the brain. And so when you give it, it gives the brain energy that it knows what it is. Right? It knows what pink randomness is. It's an organized chaos, and it will absorb it, and it will disseminate it to different parts of the brain that need it.
Yeah.
And we've watched this work. It's been fascinating to watch this process. I don't claim to understand all this stuff. Trust me. I mean, it's really high end stuff. And I came up with the idea, but then it's like, what the hell is that? It's like, yeah. But that's one of the things we've been working on, and that's it's working fairly well. I like that, and we have a number of different things like biphasic stimulation. That's another one that's really fascinating, and that's
What
where
is-
you're
Yeah.
two phases. Basically, you're creating, you're making it pulse in one polarity and then pulse in another polarity. So
Are they like
positive.
opposite polarities? In
Yeah,
particular?
yeah. So the alternating current, for instance, it's when it alternates from positive to negative.
Right.
And the number of times it does it per second is the frequency. So if it alternates 10 times in 1 second, you have a 10 hertz frequency, right? With biphasic stimulation, you can pulse it in a positive polarity for X amount of time. You can say how many times you want to pulse it. Well, I can pulse it, 100 times in 1 second in one polarity, and then stop it at 0 and then pulse it negatively for 100 times. And now I have a different way of being able to stimulate the brain. Biphasic stimulation is incredibly disruptive. And when you have significant depression or anxiety or frontal lobe disorders, that you can apply it to the frontal lobe, and it will break up those persistent communications in the brain that are unremitting, that even medications bounce off of. But when you put this on there, it'll break it like concrete, but gently, and so it doesn't hurt you. And it's wild, man. I mean, I wrote I'm going to publish a paper this year, and there's a table in the I've written a lot of protocols, and table 160. I'm calling it a table 160 study, and it's an antidepressant protocol, and it's delivered to the dorsolateral prefrontal and to the preorbital on the right side, and it does direct current stimulation for like 60 seconds, and it shuts off, and it does biphasic stimulation for 60 seconds, and it goes back to direct current. It keeps on alternating between the two. And so the brain can't figure out what you're doing to it. Brain, is smart, and it knows when you're trying to do something to it, and it will erect defenses to stop and not change. But if you know how to, dance with it, there's a way to be able to stay one step ahead to where it can't continue doing the bad stuff it was doing, and then you'll disrupt it. And when you disrupt those areas long enough, then you can retrain it to do something different. And so that's what we did. And there was a first responder in Florida that he was a CEO, and this guy had depression for, he had PTSD, been blown up, beat up, drugged, you name it. And he had a really bad head injury. And so I treated him, and I'm walking across the campus looking for somebody, and he sees me, and I'm kind of hard to miss, So he's like, "There's that hairy dude. That's the guy," So see him walking towards me, and I'm like, "Uh-oh," And he literally grabs me and he pushes me against the wall, And I'm like, "Whoa, dude!" And he goes, "I need to know." I go, "Well, what?" He goes, "Is it possible that my depression could stop after a single treatment?" He goes, "Got to be placebo, huh?" I go, "When was that?" He goes, "Yesterday." And I go, "You don't feel depressed today?" And he goes, "No." I go, "Well, placebo doesn't continue after you go to sleep. When you wake up, the placebo effect is, null and void.
Yeah.
You start all over again." I go, "So if you were chronically depressed yesterday and you got treated and you woke up today and you don't feel that way, that's beyond placebo."
Wow.
And so he was like, "Well," and I said, "Go get your treatment today," because we treat them every day. I said, "In 5 days, we'll measure your brain again, see what it does." And it was completely different.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's it." So we have these really cool multimodal treatment methods that we're using. And I have a bunch of them that I've put together. It's like instead of just one thing, we're giving different kinds of energy in order to help the brain to move along. But it doesn't work unless you are informed by data. And so we built a system where we measure the organ that we're going to treat. We get the EEG data, and then we take that data, we work it up, and we fly it to a cloud-based repository where you get matched against 5,000 people, and we have all these biomarkers we're looking for, and we find the areas of your brain that are not working the way they're supposed to in terms of power and frequency. Yeah. And then this AI takes that, puts it in a report, it hyper quantifies it. It looks at those networks and it goes, "That network back here isn't playing ball. It's not communicating in this way and this way." And then it starts writing it all down. And then it makes a report, and then it sends it to you. And what it does is, now what we're going to release in the next 2 weeks is, I basically said, well, I got to plant myself into the AI because I'm one of the people that knows how to say, this is what you need. Here's the protocol you should get. So I just built a protocol generator, and this will be the thing that, if we look back on this now, it's still not released. It's going to be released in the next 2 weeks. But basically, it takes all that AI information about your brain, and it runs it through a Dr. Dogris AI that says, based on this data, I would give you this, this, and this. And put the electrodes here, give it for this long, and do this. So it's a virtual us, wow, basically, here at Neurofield. And it's pulling data that, frankly, is really cool. The AI is capable of being able to look at quantified systems in the brain in a much more in-depth way, and faster than I can.
Right.
And so, it's pulling up all these network, issues where the communications are off, power levels are off, so-and-so is not talking to so-and-so, and it says, based on your patient's issues, this area of the brain is supposed to do this, and it's not. So here you go, and it rips that out for you.
Yeah, I know you said it hasn't released yet, but I'm sure you used it in testing or whatever at various phases.
Oh God, yeah, we've been beta testing. I I have 17 versions of the program right now. Serious. And I'm on version 17 right now.
Yeah.
And the 18 is maybe in my inbox right now. We're I'm on the next piece of it. So you
Yeah.
have to keep on teaching it because AI is like a baby. And
Right.
it's like a baby that hallucinates. So you're really gonna watch that sucker because it'll scrub the net, it'll come up with weird stuff, so you have to prevent it and give it a lot of rules about the way it's allowed to behave.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of those ethical responsibilities because in order to do that, you have to spin the wheel a lot of times.
Yeah.
I've probably run over 1,000 cases through the test bill, um, uh, you know, in the last 3 months, just
Yeah.
looking at it. So
Very cool.
it's really exciting though, because
Yeah.
this is the next game changer. Because we have now it's a completely informed EEG system that analyzes your brain, your data, comes up with a methodology based on real science, real metrics that uses a tested and true real neurostimulation system that's multimodal
Wow.
that yields results.
Have you seen like with using the AI in this way, have you seen any particularly like unique like insights or things of that nature that I know you haven't seen before?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the word hyper quantification is what I haven't seen anything be able to quantify the brain. Remember, 85 billion neurons, right?
Right.
So when you're feeding this, there's a lot of data that comes out of your brain when we measure an EEG. It's not just a little squiggle; it's a lot of frequencies. And every second of EEG basically takes 256 observations on your brain
No.
every second. And so we get 15 minutes of that, right? So we got over 200,000 observations on your brain that we can feed into the AI. And then we can say, okay, AI, now break it up and let's slice and dice and chop this up using these different kinds of analysis tools. And one of the things that science has been really good at over the last 30 years is like the Schwartz Center for Computational Neuroscience at UC San Diego. They have devoted themselves to generating tools to look at the brain, which we have been looking at for years. And I'm like, wow, these are great tools. And being clinicians, we're able to build the bridge to the academic side and say, well, take that measures this. Now, this is what it means clinically. That measures that. This is what it means clinically. And putting the two together has been a challenge. You know, but we're doing it,
Yeah.
and we're really close.
That's awesome. That's super cool to hear. That kind of makes me remember like one of the questions I kind of had for you was like, you've worked so intensely as like an inventor and a clinician, like, and then bridging that gap within the academic space and you're introducing these new fields. Can you just like talk about what I guess that journey has been like for you with bringing sort of these clinical experiences and that doesn't necessarily fit with the typical, I guess, scientific model at that time, and
Is that
challenging those
light? You want to know
preconceptions?
what
Yeah.
that's like?
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. Well, I mean, it really kind of blows my mind. When you think about science, right? Well, people think about science and they think about these staunch scientists, and they're going to follow the scientific method and damn the torpedoes, and you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and blah blah blah, and a lot of really rigid thinking, And I get it. I mean, you should know you should understand the model. You should know how to carry out an experiment. You have to know how to replicate that experiment. You have to go through all the steps that are necessary. But you are allowed to innovate. You are allowed to think. You are allowed to break the fucking rules. And I think you should, because that's how stuff is found. That's how it's discovered. And so, yeah, I pissed off a lot of people along the way because I did stuff that, frankly, went against the grain. asking questions about like, wow, what would happen if we gave delta to the brain or gave theta band frequency to the brain? Well, back in the neurofeedback field, when the earth was cooling, when we did amplitude training, that was one of the most popular methods in the 90s, which was the downtrain theta, right? Because that would make you better. Theta was bad. You didn't want a lot of that. Theta is what you generate when you wake up in the morning, you're half awake, half asleep. It's also what you generate when you meditate. And when the brain wants to build that bridge between two hub systems, it generates theta. So if we squash that, what happens?
Yeah, stop communicating.
It stops communicating. It screws us up. It's not necessarily the answer. And so, but when we put them in phase with each other, they don't go up in power. They stay at the same power level and they communicate. And information starts to transfer. So I was saying, well, let's try that. And boy, did I piss off a lot of people. So the issue I have with it, being a scientist, yeah, I'm a scientist. I'm one that's willing to break the rules for the right reasons. I think that being innovative and engaging, if any young kid is listening to me, I would say engage in the fun of science. The just how cool is it to be, it's like when you to have the feeling of awe when you're discovering something new. It's like being a little kid and seeing the world again for the first fucking time. And you go, wow, look at that. That's amazing. And you have that level of passion towards it. Then you go into this place where you go, oh my God, this is fascinating, and be willing to have the argument. Be willing to have, the conversation about what little thing you're thinking about and argue it.
Yeah.
And engage in the spirit of it. Yeah. That's where, you can disagree, you can argue, you can get passionate about it, you get pissed off. Fine. Do it. That's where these discoveries come from. Just sitting back and, being part of the model, there's a lot of people that do that. They're happy with it. That's cool. I'm not. You'll never see me doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I'm not built that way. But, that's what I think it should be.
Yeah. For yourself, with like your ability to challenge and continue to press, like, is that something that has always been like innate for you, or is that something you developed kind of the courage to keep kind of going at it and do the harder thing that people? Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I guess that's just my unique wiring. Yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah.
And I like to tinker. It's what I do best.
Nice.
And I'll work on an idea again and again and again and again until I get there. And it'll bother me. That's the problem. So I'll see a patient where we're not getting where we want to get with them, and I'll literally be walking around and that solution is still in the back of my head. And I'll be like, damn, and I wonder if I'm going to figure that one out,
Yeah.
I'll even dream about stuff sometimes. So it's kind of cool.
Very cool. And then I know you co-run your businesses with your lovely wife, Tiff. I'm curious, just as a totally different pivot type of question, but like, what has that been like for you to run a business with your spouse and the person that you do life with in all these different ways? And like, how has that been to like navigate whether the ups and downs or challenges or the benefits of that world?
Oh, it's wonderful. It's the greatest thing ever. That's what I'm supposed to say. No, it's excruciating. Help me. No. No. Actually, Tiff is, it's been wonderful, honestly. It's been great. She is I want to back up. I've watched her over the last 10 years develop into this expert. Phenomenal brain. I mean, this lady is crazy smart, wicked smart. And she has abilities to conceptualize and understand the EEG better than most. And is really, at a very young age, establishing herself as a computational neuroscientist that is um, extremely competent. And she's great at organization, putting things together, that kind of thing. Whereas I suck at it. I mean, again, I'm the guy you want to build something for you. Okay. I mean, that's where people come to me and go, if nobody can help me, but you might in your crazy little brain come up with a way to actually do this. So go ahead and have at it. It's all do that stuff. And that's where we build the tools and we make the software and we make this hardware. And I just keep on throwing it out there. And then we don't look back. We just keep on going. My engineer and I for 18 years have been doing that. And one of our just the things that we say all the time is our mantra is don't look back.
Mm-hmm.
People are like, what happens if they reverse engineer? I'm like, good luck. Good luck. I mean, sure, great.
Yeah.
Better for the world. I'm not afraid of any of that stuff. It's like, that's ridiculous. It's science. We're supposed to be sharing. We're supposed to be talking. We're supposed to be, for the better good. It's not about just personal gain. It has nothing to do with me. So what Tiff brings to the table is the adult in the room. She's the one that helps to organize and to put together. She's almost like the librarian that has the ability to take all of this massive stuff and put it in its spot so that it's usable. Single-handedly, she built the school that we have. Put it all together. And continues to pound away at that piece of iron and has really manufactured some amazing. There's all these videos and things where you can learn how to do different things in neuroscience, which she put together.
That's cool.
And we have a program where you can get a QEEG certification or a neurofeedback certification. She wrote it. I could never do that. Well, I could, but it wouldn't be anything anybody would want to read.
It would make sense to you and nobody else.
Oh, it would be like little stick men, I mean, it would be very, very Neanderthal. That's probably the best I could do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Nick, this has been like just a phenomenal conversation. And I think one of the questions I always ask my guests at the end of the episode is just, what's one thing that you might, like a question you might have for the audience that might have them think about something in a different way or shift their perspective?
Wow. What question would I have for the audience? I would challenge you to think about how you regard yourself, and I would challenge you to think about how you show up. In your best, most powerful, conscious self. What does that look like? Every day? That's what I would say.
Beautiful. Nick, Dr. Dogris, this has been an amazing conversation. Anywhere you want to send anybody else before we go? Any websites or social media or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to say all that. Huh? So there's neurofield.com, which is our website, which is actually being revamped right now. That's where the hardware software is. And then there's neurofieldneurotherapy.com, which is our clinic here in Santa Barbara, California, where we work out of. There's School of Neurotherapy, which is our training arm, and that's where schoolofneurotherapy.com, which is really a great one for all these educational stuff. There's mountains of information in there. I mean, and stuff that I wish I had come across when I was learning how to get in this field, which simply didn't exist at the time.
Yeah.
And so if you want to learn fast, that's the place. And, anybody that wants to do it, it's a discipline. It's not just a thing. It's a huge discipline to walk into. And I'm not trying to scare you away, but try to prepare you for what's coming. And then there's FHEhealth.com, FHEhealth.com. They are, that's the facility. FHE is the facility that I'm the executive director of neuroscience in Florida, in Deerfield Beach. And great spot, beautiful people that run it, and really amazing commitment to helping people. There's a lot of neurofield practitioners around the country, thousands of them, and we're kind of a grassroots thing that kind of grew out of necessity. So, but those are the main ones. That'll get you started.
Perfect. Well, again, Dr. Dogris, this has been super fun and a blast, and I'll have to have you come back on sometime. But thanks again for coming on the show. We'll have to talk again soon.
Right on, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was fun. Yeah.